Let's talk about burnout. Have you ever experienced burnout yourself? Let me know in the comments. I know I have. Let me tell you a story. About 7 years ago, I was hired at Google full-time, and I could not believe it was true. I was thinking, surely someone is going to notice that this was a mistake, that I should not be there. Everyone was so smart and so talented, and I really felt like I didn't belong. And you probably guessed it. That was typical imposter syndrome. As a result, I worked hard, and I mean really, really hard. I was saying yes to everything. I was like the yes girl. I was offering my help on every single project. I was getting very little sleep. It was the first time ever in my life that I started drinking coffee because I could barely keep my eyes open during the day. Once I had to travel to San Francisco and I had a call in the middle of the night for me with a colleague that was based in London. I was presenting the results of some research I conducted, and when he very gently questioned the methodology that I used, I started crying. And in order for him to not notice, I just stopped the call and pretended that the connection was too bad. I didn't know it at the time, but I was very close to burning out. Or maybe I actually burned out and powered through because after all, I didn't want for anyone to notice the imposter in the room. What's interesting is that it's not so much the quantity of work that made it hard to cope. I've had more work before and after this episode, and I did just fine. It wasn't really the long hours that made me physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. Rather, it was the lack of control. I had no control over my goals, no control over the deadlines. Many people who suffer from burnout actually tend to be high achievers for whom losing control is actually very distressing. And it makes it even harder for them to share with their colleagues because, let's face it, mental health is still pretty much taboo, and admitting that you're losing control is not necessarily something that's going to make you shine in the workplace. But you don't need to experience burnout to dread going to work. Turns out burnout has a cousin called Boreout. This is where people struggle with the daily sameness of their job. What burnout and Boreout have in common is that they leave you exhausted, feeling empty, and incapable to deal with the daily challenges of your job. Worst, if left unchecked, early symptoms like demotivation, anxiety, and sadness can actually lead to depression. Of course, it's okay to be bored at times. Even when you're working on a side project that you picked for yourself, there are sometimes some tedious tasks that are pretty boring. But Boreout is very different from boredom. Psychologist Chief Savills, when talking about Boreout, explains that you become irritated, cynical, and you feel worthless. Although you don't have much to do, and what you have to do is not stimulating you enough, you get extremely stressed. With the Boreout, you get stuck in your comfort zone for too long until your personal development comes to a halt. Basically, burnout is when you're overstimulated. Boreout is when you're understimulated. And in both cases, we are not stimulated in the right way, and that doesn't result in a sense of purpose. We're less productive, less creative, and basically work sucks. So how can you go about recreating a sense of purpose and meaning in your work? First, align. Ask yourself why you wanted to work in this company or in this project in the first place. Is your work still aligned with your goals and your values? If not, it may be time to consider maybe switching projects or even changing jobs. Second, brainstorm. I know sometimes it can be hard to come up with a solution on your own. Is the lack of meaning coming from the project, from the team, from the work style? You can sit down with a friend or a trusted colleague to brainstorm ideas and see if there's a way to move forward. And finally, conduct experiments. Don't take radical decisions while experiencing bore-out or burnout. Try small changes at first, baby steps. For example, you could try and change a little something in your routine, or if you want to take a bigger step, you could consider going and talk to a counselor. A, B, C. Align, brainstorm, conduct experiments. Remember, you don't really find your purpose, you build it, and there's no silver bullet. It's the process of defining the purpose that can be one of the most fulfilling aspects of our lives. It can take several forms, it can change over time, we can lose our purpose sometimes, but the good news is that we can rebuild it and recreate meaning in sometimes some of the most surprising ways. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Squishy, squishy.